good day, everybody, and welcome to High Heat. Nice to have with us as we talk about what's going on about a baseball season, which we have upon us, of course, with the 60 games. Good to have with us Moses and Mitch Green. Elliot Cobb's there, too. Liberty Mutual defines the show, and it's you and me now as we discuss what's happening. We'll do plenty of shows for you in some capacity between now and the official, quote-unquote, opening day somewhere around the 23rd or the 24th of July. And let's analyze these 60 games here for a second, try to figure out where we are and who to expect to be, right in the mix at the end of the Derby. The one thing I would say, this is where the extra playoff teams this year would have been applicable. Whether you don't like extra playoff teams or not, this year would have been good because it would have protected the teams that are good coming into the year from something unforeseen happening. The Yankees and Dodgers are the two teams that I think of. Who knows what could happen? You could have a COVID thing. You got to keep that in mind. Injuries, a slow start. And we all know that the Yankees and Dodgers, as the season began in March, are two of the best teams in the sport. And, over 162, they would have figured out a way to make the postseason. Over 60, which is just 37% of a year, you don't know. And the extra playoff teams would have provided a little bit of a cushion for the real good team. So that's one thing I wanted to say right out of the gate. The second thing I wanted to say, it's going to be very difficult for an American League East or an NL East team to make the playoffs as a wild card, because think of all the good teams in those divisions and the crossover games. I mean, you got four good teams theoretically on paper in the NL East outside the Marlins. And, outside of the Orioles, you have at least one competitive team in Toronto and the Red Sox, and two good teams in Tampa and the Yankees. So, theoretically, you have six good teams, a couple of competitive teams, and only a couple of bad teams. Compare this to the other crossover divisions, and it's going to make it a little harder for the teams in the AL East and the NL East to get a quote-unquote a wild card spot. I feel a little difficult spot for the West teams because the travel will be tricky. Texas is going to have to not just go to Seattle and Oakland, they're also going to have to land in San Francisco and LA and places like that. So there's going to be some travel issues for those Texas teams, because not only do they have to obviously play the three travel trips, Seattle, Oakland, and Anaheim, that they do in their division, you're going to have to add 3 or 4 other California trips. Those are 3-hour flights with San Diego, the Dodgers, and the Giants. So keep that in mind, too, as far as the travel. So as little travel you do, the better off you're going to be. I think the other thing that's interesting about this 60 games is how many teams are going to embrace this. If I was a GM and manager, I would, but I could also see teams saying, it's kind of a weird season anyway. We got some injuries. I got young pitching. Let's not go crazy. Let's, keep everything under wraps for another day. No fans. It's kind of odd. So I can see some teams looking at it from a standpoint of almost a practice 60 games, despite the fact that, less games gives everybody more of an equal opportunity to make the playoffs. And then I can see other teams thinking, hey, look, we could steal one. So, how teams embrace the year will be interesting. I think some teams will be conservative and realize what it is, and then other teams will say, what the heck, I got 60 games, let's go out there and win. And the other thing that I would say, and I say this also about the NBA, that I would say about baseball, I know this is wacky, but this is one year that I actually think it's important, and I'm usually one who goes the other way. I likes the difference of it with the teams that you don't normally see postseason play. I think this is a year you need some of the teams that are good going in to be in the postseason. The Yankees, the Dodgers, those two specifically, Houston, and that I would like to see that you want in the postseason, because it adds legitimacy. If you get a Diamondback, or I'll give you a weird one, Diamondback Royal World Series, there's going to a lot of people say, hold on now, Diamondbacks and Royals, we know that they played 162. They wouldn't have made the World Series. So I think you need the good teams to be good, for the authenticity of the year. I think that's important. And the other thing that I would say, let's not make a big deal now about 60 games and the acrimony ruined the year. No, it didn't. It cost them 20 games, because the most anybody was going to play this year in baseball was going to be 80 games or 81 games. So the idea that they're only playing 60 and that somehow that is a disgrace compared to the 80 is absurd. It's only 20 games. It's 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. So the 60 games, 80 game thing is not that big a deal to me. So it was going to be a shortened season anyway. I would have preferred 80. I got 60. I don't think it's that big a deal. It's a long book, lots of different chapters, 700 pages. You know, you sort of read each chapter, you go along, each chapter's got something interesting in it. Then you go to the next chapter. Not this time. Baseball is a sprint. First, you know, who's going to basically win 35 games first? There's 10 teams, and I would think that all 10 teams that make the postseason are going to have to go probably 35-25. I would think there would be enough of those teams that would do that, and then away you go in a postseason scenario. And how they adapt to no fans, and I think there will not be fans. And I don't think baseball is going to allow certain teams to have fans and others not, because that's a competitive disadvantage to me. So I think it's got to be one rule for everybody. But regardless, I mean, it's going to be an adjustment for these great athletes not to play with fans. I mean, it's going to be a little different, and that's going to take some getting used to, and not a couple days. That's going to take a couple weeks. And in this season, you don't have a couple of weeks. So you got to keep that in mind too. 1-2 week period, and boom, you're done. So, I mean, how these teams adjust to an empty ballpark with, no ambient sound from 45,000 people in the building is going to be interesting. That's going to be an adjustment for everybody. We shall see how that works itself out. Listen, it's a different scenario, and we're still a long way away. Things could change. Got a month to go. It's June, middle of June, late June. You still got July 23rd, July 24th. Who knows how this next month is going to be from a health standpoint, too. Got to keep that in mind as well. So we shall see. I think all sports are going to fight through this virus. I think you will have a season, but, you got to make sure that, you can't have your best players getting ill, because that's going to be a factor here, too. It's something different, something unique. Let them do anything they want with the rules. I've said that 1,000 times in the last 4 months. Put a guy at second base in the 10th inning. Nobody can moan and groan about that. I'm a purist. Live with the DH in the National League. The world's not going to end with a 3-batter minimum. Just deal with it. If you're a baseball fan, just deal with it. A little different, understood, deal with it. Something different, something unique. The authenticity of the year based on who is standing at the end, I think, is a significant factor that we will keep an eye on as we move along. So, and we will move along, and we're going to do a show for you next week. And when we do one, we'll have Bob Melvin with us, the A's manager, because now we can start looking at how these teams are going to adjust to a shortened season and training camp and home parks and, and all those kinds of things. No fans and what have you. So we shall see how some of these teams handle this. And eventually, I'm not going to give you a date yet, but eventually you'll have a high heat on for you every day for 60 minutes, those of you who care. Good job out of Moses today. And those of you, of course, with Mitch Green, Liberty Mutual, of course, too. We will see you next week with Bob Melvin. We look forward to that. Have a safe weekend, and adios.